so much. It's wonderful to be here, and I just very quickly want to introduce you to Niza Jay, our poster boy, and one of our main actors in the film, and Cait Pansegrouw, our wonderful producer. We're all going to we'll be around after the screening to answer any of your questions, but just to give you a little bit of context for this film, the initiation that's depicted in this film is a rites of passage into manhood, and this is something that is actually quite widely practiced throughout South Africa. It's a practice that is particular to the Xhosa-speaking people of South Africa, which is the second largest population group of our country, and that amounts to about 9 million people. And this particular rites of passage is something that is considered absolutely vital and essential to cultural identity. So a boy who is not initiated will not be considered a man within a cultural context throughout his life. So it's a very important moment, to the extent that even young men who are raised in sort of middle class or affluent urban environments would still be under a huge amount of pressure to go through this experience. So we'd be happy to discuss this in more detail once you've seen the film. But also to say that that it's an amazing moment for us to actually be here, because we've met with a huge amount of resistance. There have been a lot of protests. There have been attempts by the Xhosa king to have this film banned in South Africa, for reasons that probably will be more apparent after you've seen it. But again, we'd be happy to answer any questions. For right now, I just want to say that this is an incredible moment. We're here representing a significant community of people who have put a lot of time, investment, and energy into making this film a reality. Every person that you see on screen is a first language Xhosa speaker with their own first-hand experience of this initiation. So to say that this is a very personal endeavor is an understatement. So thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing a very powerful film. I mean, I guess talking about this film, a lot of it's going to involve talking about the controversies around it, and I think it basically starts with, you're a white man making a film about a culture and a community that you're not part of. I mean, how big a concern for you was that when you started this?
It was huge. In fact, it was the single most important conversation that we had from the get-go. I think this would not have been possible in the least if it wasn't for the collaboration that I had with Thando Golozana. He's an important Xhosa novelist. He has been through the initiation himself. And his first novel was actually about the initiation. So he actually broke quite a few taboos and faced quite a lot of criticism for dealing with the subject matter as explicitly as he did. So that was really my first port of call, was when I discovered this novel, this wonderful novel, was to approach him and to ask him to collaborate on the screenplay. And when he agreed and when he responded very positively to the idea of the film, that was the first time that I felt that, okay, there was potentially a way to do this. But I think that the whole principle of collaboration is something that really informed the entire process. I think to a large extent my role as a director very often was about trying to create space for people to bring their own experiences and ideas on board, much more so than I would have done, under any other circumstances, and to bring it as close to an authentic experience as possible. So like I said in the beginning, the entire film was cast with first language Xhosa speakers. All of these men have their own first-hand experience of the initiation. And they were enacting the ritual as they would. So there was, in those larger crowd sequences, there was no conventional directing or placement happening per se. We would arrive on set, and this community would discuss amongst themselves how they were going to do it and how they would represent themselves. And I think for us, you know, when we started working like this, there was something so palpable and so magnetic about those bigger crowd sequences that we very quickly started moving all the other scenes with our principal cast into that stylistic vein, trying to strip the performances down as much as possible to dovetail into that quality that we found on set. Yeah.
Right. Well, Niza, how did it affect your work? I mean, you were one of the few actors who was actually an actor before this, right? And one of the few cast members who had not gone through that ritual.
I'm the only cast member who hasn't undergone the ritual. And I was an acting student when I made the film. I'd made the decision to quit acting. I was overacting. I hated it. But I think it was fate. It was meant to be, because I did a bachelor's degree in dramatic arts. So I did 2 years of acting studies. Making the film was challenging because, again, like I said, I wanted to quit. So when it came along, I thought, okay, so this is the moment where I'm going to show my acting chops. I'm going to go deep into a zone. I'm going to put myself into a place. I'm going to, yes, this is the moment. And then the first brief I got from John was that, don't prepare anything. And I thought, oh my God, what does he mean, don't prepare anything? But I think the most important thing that he said to me was that I needed to empty myself and prepare myself to become a different person and encounter new things. Because when John met me, I had very strong opinions on the ritual and, rigid ideals and notions of manhood. So when he gave me the note to empty myself, it allowed me to go onto set and into that experience with an open mind, and that enabled me to develop an appreciation for the ritual, which allowed me to deliver, I think, a balanced performance. Because I think had I gone in there just wanting to bulldoze this whole thing and just completely speak against it, Gwanda wouldn't have been as his role in the film would not have been as powerful as I think it actually was. Because if you notice the kind of disruption that he poses in the film, he's not necessarily going around and telling everyone, don't be here, you need to go, this is a rigid ritual, it's oppressive and all of that. He's just trying to figure it out for himself. And then when he realizes that someone close to him, which is his caregiver, is also suffering at the hands of this, then he starts taking, action and responsibility for him and trying to make him come to terms with himself. But I think the film allowed me to develop an appreciation and an understanding for the ritual, especially because I hadn't undergone it myself.
Well, Cait, did it concern you as producer that you're making a movie about a ritual that's supposed to be secret, that women aren't supposed to know anything about?
Of course. I think we were all very aware of how controversial this film was going to be. But I also cast-directed the film, and the casting process took almost 2 years. So I still feel a huge responsibility for the cast, especially the younger cast. I lived with 14 of the young boys from the film on the actual location where we shot for 6 weeks. And we bonded very closely. So when the controversy started to arise when we got selected for Sundance, it was very, very conflicting emotionally for me, because I, of course, was very concerned with the safety, particularly of the cast. But I think we were all very proud of the film that we made, and very proud of the questions that it's posing. And the fact that it is urging uncomfortable but very necessary conversations. So that allowed us to get through the process. But to be honest, this year has been immensely challenging for everyone involved, but particularly our three leads and John. But I think we're very proud of how this film was made, how collaborative it was, and that has allowed us to stand very firmly aside the film that we've made.
Just to add that it was a bit of a misconception that the film exposes secrets. I think that there have been several works that have dealt with the initiation, most notably Nelson Mandela's autobiography, where he speaks quite extensively about the initiation. So we sort of confined ourselves to what was already available in the public domain. We had no interest in making an expose and in revealing anything that wasn't already out there. That really wasn't the intention of the film. So I think that is perhaps a perception that's not entirely accurate. I think there are a lot of things that we left out, details that we chose to omit because of reasons of them being sensitive, and really embraced the initiation for its symbolic value, which is the notion of becoming a man, manhood and transformation.
Were the people, the actors, the people on set from the Xhosa community, were they comfortable with what we were doing, or were there times when they balked about showing that?
Well, we sort of mediated in different ways. So our core cast were completely on board, not just in terms of knowing all the aspects of the story, but ideologically in terms of where we were coming from and why we were doing it. Our broader cast, if I can call them that, our community of men, knew that there was a same-sex kind of narrative through the story, but didn't necessarily know all the specifics of the narrative, and that was a choice that we made. We decided from the onset to keep the secret part of the story secret. So while our core cast had all of this kind of additional information about what was going on underneath the surface, the broader community of men was sort of picking up on certain dynamics as we went along, and we actually shot those scenes more or less chronologically. So that was a very interesting dynamic, because we were effectively creating this controlled experiment where there was a certain homophobic tension on set. These men were reacting and behaving in any way that they felt was correct. We didn't try and inhibit or steer those reactions. And so they would, as time went on, they would sort of cotton on to the idea. Well, I think from day one, they knew that Niza's character was this defiant, queer kid from the city. But then slowly but surely they discovered, oh, but hang on a second, Xolani is probably also. And then there was this day where there was kind of a ripple on set where there was a rumor that Vija might also be gay, and that was very interesting to see those dynamics unfold. Yeah.
I mean, you must have known how seismic that would be, bringing in, dropping gay characters into a film that's so much, a ritual that's so much about definitions of masculinity. I mean, clearly that was controversy that you knew was going to come.
I mean, I would take it one step further and say that's the reason the film exists. When we first started speaking about the film, there's this idea that's still gaining in popularity. I mean, even now we're hearing it coming out of the new regime in Zimbabwe, which is that homosexuality is a Western practice, that it is something that is brought into Africa, and that it threatens traditional African culture. This is a very modern idea, but it is something kind of very widely utilized to justify all sorts of discrimination and violence against gay people throughout the continent. So for that reason, it was meaningful to us to do exactly that, to bring together a story about same-sex desire and a very specific traditional African custom.
Well, Niza, is that one of the reasons you wanted to do this? I mean, was that part of what drew you to this?
Absolutely. I'm someone who, I mean, go figure, look at me. I have braids and I'm wearing heels, and I identify as a man. So for a long time, I had felt that manhood and masculinity rejected me, and in that case I had nowhere to go, you know, because I can't, I think to call myself gender non-conforming or so forth is a cop-out, because I identify as a man and I want to be nothing else but a man. So to be a part of a film that was directly confronting, you know, these very present and very loud ideas of manhood and masculinity was definitely something that I wanted to do. Even going to the audition, I had to choose whether I was going to go to the audition looking like a conventional actor, as in a white t-shirt and jeans, which is what all, you know, internet sites say if you are asking, okay, so what is the best way to go to an audition? It says wear jeans and a t-shirt. But when the day of the audition came, I had no time to change, and I was wearing a black crop top and black ripped jeans and a black floor-length coat, and I had piercings all over my face. And I thought, oh God, in this country like South Africa, film industry across the world that constantly rejects anything that is not heteronormative masculinity, am I going to even be considered? Am I even going to be viewed as a man, or am I simply going to be, you know, rendered abject and viewed as something that can't even be worked with? So when I found out what the film was trying to do and got on set and heard the intentions of the director, and I remember John and I had a very interesting conversation over a cigarette when I was doing the callback, and I noticed that it really was speaking to these rigid notions and aiming to dismantle them, and not, you know, say that if you're a man who abides by the rules of masculinity, you're a bad man, but to say that what of the men who don't necessarily abide by that? Where do we fall? Where in society and where in culture specifically do we lie? Because I am nothing but a Xhosa man. I wish to be nothing else but a Xhosa man. So to make a film that was directly speaking to my experience, and my family had been asking me about undergoing the ritual for, I think, 3 years before the film actually came along, and I was telling them I think I have questions, I have some concerns. But ultimately it was because one of the myths around the ritual is that it cures you of, you know, homosexuality. If you're young and you're going into the ritual, you're going to come out on the other side straight. So for me, it presented a crisis where I thought, oh God, no, if I am going to go into this ritual and it's going to change me, hell no, I am very comfortable with who I am. So to find a film that was inserting a character who was disobeying, you know, these boundaries of masculinity and not vilifying them, but saying he exists and he's valid, was really what drew me to the film and to the narrative and the cause of the film.
Well, Cait, you said you were casted, so when he came in and not wearing jeans and a t-shirt, did it help or hurt him?
I think we really, specifically with our three leads, we really cast them as kind of versions of themselves. So when Niza came in, I think John and I knew Kwanda's arrived. This is him, and of course we saw a few people after that, but Niza was just unforgettable, and I think we both always knew that he was always going to be our Kwanda.
Well, John, from a distance it feels like, well, South Africa has to be one of the more liberal countries in Africa when it comes to gay. I mean, same-sex marriage has been legal there for 10 years, whatever. But I guess the reaction to this film in some circles has shown that perhaps it's not as liberal as we think from here.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation, but I think, you know, like many places, we have, you know, in theory, we have a very open-minded constitution. Like you say, gay marriage is legal, gay adoption is legal. I live a kind of middle-class urban existence, and I can be out and you know, there's no problem with that. But the reality is very different, specifically for more impoverished communities. and certainly when you move into the kind of rural areas of the country, we still face a lot of homophobic violence. We deal with something called corrective rape, which is this horrific notion that lesbians need to be kind of raped to be taught a lesson. And the reality is that many LGBTQI people in our country are just not protected by the system. So you know, it's one of those situations where you've got two very different and contrasting realities depending on who you are and frankly where you fall on the socioeconomic spectrum. Yeah.
So I'll ask this of everybody. I mean, what has your experience been like since this film screened at Sundance? Have there been, you know, moments that have been scary, or Niza, you want to jump in on this one?
Sure. It's been an amazing year. It's been a wild ride. We knew we were making a divisive film, and the film certainly has its supporters and its detractors. For me, there was a kind of a defining moment. At one stage earlier this year, there was a protest organized on Wits University campus in opposition to the film. And there's actually a clip on YouTube which shows a little bit of this. And in the clip, you see a group of men, sort of traditionalists, all students at the university, who are protesting against the film. And simultaneously, there are a group of counter-protesters who arrived. There are some sort of clearly sort of kids from a queer community, some feminists, academics, people who started speaking back against the protesters, and then really a very interesting dialogue that breaks out quite spontaneously in this group of people. And it should be pointed out that all of these people had not yet seen the film at that stage. So at that moment I was completely blown away, and this incredible sense of relief set in, because I felt that actually now the film in a way belongs to the world. It's no longer anything that directly concerns me. It really is doing what it was meant to do, which is to start a conversation and to really kind of trigger all sorts of different kinds of responses. So yeah, it's been an amazing ride and an amazing process.
Niza, have you had defining moments?
A number. I actually went to the university where the protest was organized. I remember on that day I randomly went on to school, as I do. Someone came up to me and they said, "You need to go home." And I thought, why do I need to go home? They said, "There's a protest against your film." I'm thinking, oh, there have been protests everywhere, whatever, what's new? I said, no, this one is serious. It's right by the big monument, and I was planning on going past that monument to go withdraw money at the ATM or something. And I thought, literally, my safety has been compromised, you know, because if I am on this campus and these people aren't just protesting, there's an entitlement that a lot of the people who are against the film feel, right? They feel that they can threaten us. They feel that they can violate us. They feel that they can come up to you and tell you that you've sold out. Even people who you think are supporting you, they'll say, "Oh, Niza, you're doing so well, but hey, obviously you had to sell out just for your first big break." And I'm thinking, what do you mean I sold out? What does that stupidity even mean? You know? And furthermore, I have been met with a very different kind of backlash, where people aren't only saying, precisely because I haven't undergone the ritual, people aren't saying that you betrayed manhood and so forth. They're saying, oh, because you didn't undergo the ritual, that is why you are a man who wants to become a woman. That is why you're a black person who wants to become white. I mean, look at my skin. If I bleached my skin, how awful would that be, and how thin would it become? So it's been that, but precisely because of how I look, because I felt that after making the film I had to remove myself from how Gwanda looked, you know, so I grew out my hair, got extensions. People don't know that that's me. So I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh, there's this amazing film, it's called The Wound, you need to see it, and there's this initiate, he's amazing." And I'm thinking, if you think he's amazing, then that's good. But it's also protected me, I think, from a lot of the backlash that the other two lead actors have gotten, because, you know, them, they can obviously make the connection that, okay, this is Nakani or this is Ubongile, whereas with me, people can completely miss it. So it's all ends of the spectrum. It's really been a trip, because my group of friends is a very conscious group of black gays who, you know, in a normal circumstance would actively speak out against the politics of this film. But when they watch the film, they realize the importance of the dialogue and the conversation that it was spurring. So it's had a lot of positive effects on myself and the people in my life, but at the same time it has been very challenging, and it has really proven that people don't have tolerance for difference, and people feel that they can disrespect you precisely because you're different. They don't think that you're human because you're different.
Before I open it up to the audience, I do want to ask one more question about the end of the film. You know, obviously there are lots of ways it could have gone at the end, and what happens feels sadly right for the characters, but it's also devastating. I mean, did you mull over other possible endings?
Yeah, certainly we thought about it quite extensively, but I think when we landed on this one, it instinctively felt to me not just right, but also like a worthwhile film to make. The most interesting, challenging ending that I think what it achieves is it asks an audience to revisit what they've just seen and to interrogate not just the narrative but their own feelings about the narrative. And I think that is maybe the most important thing, to not just kind of be seduced by this blanket notion of sort of gay rights and the sort of the nobleness of personal freedom, but to really kind of consider how difficult it is to walk in somebody like Xolani's shoes, and the incredible force of cultural identity, and what that means. I don't think anybody in this room can fully comprehend the magnitude of that. So in a way, for me, the ending, apart from being a crime of passion and a intuitive attempt to save his lover, is also a challenge to the audience to think about what they've seen.
And apart from my reservations about having this ritual change who I am, I also felt that what happened to Gwanda probably would have happened to me had I undergone the ritual, because I'm also someone who doesn't take things lying down. I probably would have questioned a lot and wanted to unearth a lot and really confronted a lot of what was going on there. So one of the things that made me not go was precisely the understanding that if you transgress a certain boundary, the repercussions for that. And as much as, it, like John said, it is Xolani's intuition to protect his lover, the truth is there's a boundary that Gwanda crossed. It's the boundary that we all crossed. He wanted to expose, he wanted to disobey the rules of this ritual, and the repercussions followed. And I think that moment really poses the question that should anyone suffer at the hands of culture, should anyone, be on the receiving end of a rock simply because they decided not to keep what they learned on the mountain?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Cait, did you have something you wanted to say about the previous question about defining moments?
I did, actually. Something that was really special and very personal to me was that in order to qualify for awards consideration, we had to do a limited run in South Africa, so we haven't had our commercial theatrical release yet. So we ran for 7 days in 2 cities, and what was really inspiring is that predominantly, specifically in art house cinema in South Africa, the audience is kind of a middle class, white, usually female audience. And in both cities, the cinema was completely dominated by black queer youth, which was incredibly rewarding for us that we had managed to reach our intended audience. And not only that, we sold out every single show consecutively in both cities for 7 days. And on top of that, this audience really rallied behind us on social media consecutively for, I think, about 6 weeks. Twitter was specifically overrun by #TheWound. And I think that is a large contributor to how we are able to be here today. I, of course, was always hopeful that we were going to be the official entry for South Africa, but we were up against a lot. And it was really, I feel, our audience that drove this conversation and really supported us and allowed us to be sitting here today. And for me, specifically, I think that's our greatest accomplishment. Everything else is nice to have and a cherry on top, but I think we're all immensely proud of that specific achievement.
Do we have any questions right here?
First of all, I want to congratulate you on your courage in taking this on. It's incredible. I have 2 quick questions. How old are these young men when they go through the ritual normally? And there's a scene in silhouette during the evening, and I couldn't determine what that was. If you could explain that.
So traditionally, initiates are sort of late adolescents, so sort of 17, 18 would be an average age. Although there's no limit. You know, if you haven't done it, you can do it at any age, theoretically. The scene in silhouette is Xolani and Vija, so it's the caregiver and his lover sort of sneaking off and having that kind of romantic, slightly kind of violent, conflicted, erotic interaction. Yeah.
Yes. What was your more challenging scene to shoot in relation with the actors to get exactly the right emotions to the camera? What was the point that you said, "Oh, this is the most difficult, and we must have to have it done"?
It's a great question, actually. Thank you. Yeah. Well,
For those in the back, the question was the most challenging scene to shoot with the actors.
Well, there's sort of 2 that come to mind, both kind of sort of love scenes, but there's one that I'd like to kind of point out, which is the scene in the middle of the film, which is sort of a breakup scene, which plays out as the sun is setting against the sort of electric pylons in the background, and there's all these different stages to the scene. So it starts out as these 2 friends getting drunk, and then the conversation moves into something a little bit more somber and earnest, and then it erupts into this conflicted, almost kind of wrestling, tussling interaction with Xolani announcing that he's not coming back to the mountain. That scene we shot 3 times, and we wanted to shoot it over that kind of end of day as we were losing light. So we literally had a 45-minute window to cover the entire scene. So we ended up shooting it over 3 consecutive days, and shooting it in its entirety all 3 days. And at the time I was thinking, well, I would probably intercut moments from each day, but really what transpired is that the first 2 days sort of became dress rehearsals, both emotional dress rehearsals for the actors as well as for us, for the camera, which had to be very flexible, grabbing moments and very quickly kind of redoing moments and resetting without much kind of technical interruption. So it was an absolutely exhausting experience, and by the 3rd day, which is actually the footage that we used, I think the actors were absolutely dead. I mean, to put it bluntly, but I think there was something of their kind of emotional rawness that led through that I was very happy with. I think it's probably still, for me, watching it now, I love watching it, and it's a scene that I'm very, very proud of. Yeah.
The second one?
The second one was actually the waterfall scene, which has similar qualities, but that was really, that we shot on literally the last day of our shoot. And we were all completely dead. and the last shot was us going into the water, myself included, with a handheld camera and these two actors approaching that waterfall. And I think we were kind of sleepwalking through the scene in a way.
The water was freezing, by the way,
freezing.
and we were in about 6 degrees Celsius weather, so it was freezing coming out of the water as well.
Yeah, in the middle in the back.
How long did it take you from conception to development to the end of production to do the film, get the film made?
Well, we first started speaking about this project about 6 or almost 7 years ago, but we really started working properly on it about 5 years ago. That's when the sort of writing, development, and financing process started. And then, we shot this in May 2016. Sorry,
yeah.
my timeline is scrambled. We finished the film at the end of last year, and so it's been a year of releasing the film. Yeah.
It took 4 years to finance. The budget was $800,000.
Wow. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, boys are being circumcised, right?
That's right.
Because that wasn't really detailed in the film.
Yeah, it's a particularly sensitive part of the ritual, and while I think it's an important part of the film, it's not something that I felt should dominate the story or that needed any kind of graphic detailing. I think for me what was more interesting and meaningful is the aftercare that comes in the sort of 8 days after that. You have this space, this very intimate interaction between the caregiver and the initiate, sort of caring for the wound and wrapping and re-wrapping the wound with special herbs. And I think that little hot box that exists there was in a way the sort of the spark that kind of initiated our story. It was this idea that two men could exist in such intimate proximity in a culture that is otherwise so hyper-masculine.
Anybody else? Right here.
And the other men in the film had undergone the ritual, right? So how did they feel as modern men, and maybe some of them city men, urban men? How did they feel about this ritual and how it speaks to them today?
Well, I think, obviously there was a strong personal investment, and a lot of people did it for very different reasons, but I'll give you two sort of examples. The first is just the community of men that we engaged, that Cait engaged actually to do this film. And what was amazing, that was something that I was extremely apprehensive about. I didn't quite know how we were going to manage this kind of large community. But the dynamic that emerged, and I think Cait takes a lot of credit for this, as well as the mediators that we had on set, was that these men felt that if they were going to go there, if they were going to do this, then they wanted to do it properly. That it almost became a point of pride. That okay, so we're gonna enact an initiation today. So this is how we're going to do it, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do that, and they were completely autonomous, but it actually became something that they really were invested in doing properly. And then the other example to give you is Bongile Mansai, who plays Vija. He's a heterosexual man. He's an important traditionalist and staunch kind of figure in his community. He does a lot of kind of youth mentorship programs. He's a very proud Xhosa man. But he's also an exceptional actor. He's a very skilled theatre actor. And I think as an artist, he was drawn to the character, even though from a cultural perspective it was something that he had a lot of reservations about. But he ultimately said to me that the reason that he chose to do this was because he has a young son. And if his son ever came to him and said, "I'm gay," then he wants to be able to say to his kid, I know something of what it is that you are going through and dealing with. And I thought that was just so profound and extraordinary. I really commend him for making that choice.
Well, I have one more question for Niza. Are you now back into wanting to act?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. I'm even moving to LA at the beginning of next year, and I'm making I've signed up for my next acting role. I'm writing and directing my first short film, and then I'm also making my first documentary, so it's pulled me back 100%. Yeah.
Watch out, LA.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for a really powerful film.